So there's a proliferation of fake and fantasy signs out there being sold as old and original. Um, what I'm tackling today is how to tell if a sign is fake and that sign being enameled rather than just tin. There are a lot of tin sign companies and enamel sign companies out there that made reproductions, and they're clearly marked with the company's sign names, such as AAA Sign Company, Desperate Sign Company, Andy Rooney, among others. And you should learn what those companies made just so you can determine whether you're looking at a reproduction or not. Basically, here I'm tackling the fakes, the most garbage that is being made, unauthorized stuff, illegally using logos and such, unauthorized stuff that never existed, etc., etc. So that's what we're going to tackle here. And like I said, just enameled / porcelain, it's the same thing. Signs that are being made in usually third world countries, but not just third world countries. Some are being manufactured in the USA, Canada, and elsewhere. So one of the easiest ways to tell is who you're buying from. Be very careful bidding on eBay. There are far more fakes out there and fantasy pieces being represented as old than actual old signs. If you're buying a sign from an East Indian seller, for example, and that sign was never used in India, it's an American sign or a Canadian sign or a UK sign that was never used in India, probably a fake, more than likely. 99% sure that it's a fake, or 95%. Let's just give them a little bit extra there. 5% might be a collector that bought it from a U.S. seller or something like that, but highly unlikely. Don't get drawn in by these particular fakes. Anyway, there's also lots of North American or UK resellers that are buying container loads or small quantities of these signs and selling them as old in their areas. So you got to watch for that as well. So buying it online, you've got to be really careful who you're buying from. Make sure you're buying from a reputable seller. The feedback on eBay, a lot of these fake sellers still have good feedback. And why, I don't know. They've just pulled the wool over a lot of people's eyes, I guess. But they're selling fake stuff, and eBay does nothing about it. So probably not even worth bothering reporting them. I would suggest reporting them anyway, just for the heck of it. But whether it does anything is unlikely. So that generally applies to general dealers as well. Buy from reputable sellers, those who will guarantee their merchandise. If it's found to be fake, a reputable seller will take it back and refund your money. They will not say, tough luck or whatever. It's just not reputable. Buying from auctions, whether it be online or even live auctions, there's a lot of these fakes being put in live auctions. There are auction companies who will hide behind the buyer beware aspect of the auction business. So there's one out of Saskatchewan right now that sells a lot of stuff that is fake, and they take no responsibility for it. There's lots of others that'll say clearly on their listings, repro or fantasy or whatever, or new, modern, something like that. So watch the auction listings and make sure you read the description to know what you're buying. But like I said, some They just hide behind the buyer beware aspect, which is unfortunate because it really hurts the business and really hurts their reputations. There are auction houses that I will not buy from simply because they will not stand behind authenticity of the merchandise they're selling. It's all buyer beware. Anyway, just watch, again, like I said, make sure you're buying from a reputable source. Now, with the old stuff, there's a pride of workmanship involved. The signs will be of quality, well made, etc. But be aware that if it is very well made, looks new, brand new, it could be a reproduction or a fantasy item or a fake item. You've got to be really careful about how well it's made. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. Now, the backs of signs, for example, of single-sided signs, that is, they tend to have things like fingerprints where they were carrying the sign, or handprints on them, streaks, numbers put on the back, kind of a finger paint number, or streaks or rack marks, that sort of thing. Now, some of the fantasy stuff have those rack marks and the odd fingerprint, etc. So that's not the determining factor. But if you're handling old signs a lot, you get to know what the backs look like and what a back of an authentic sign looks like, rather. So some of the reproductions will have consistent rack marks on them, and you'll be able to figure out eventually that it's made by such and such sign company out of India. So be very careful in using flaws on the backs to determine age or not. Get to know what the old stuff looks like. Now, kind of back to what sources you're getting your signs from. That definitely can be used as a way to determine whether it's fake or not. Like I said, if the seller is selling an American sign and they're out of India, odds are it's going to be a reproduction or a fantasy piece. So, or fake rather, not reproduction. Reproduction implies that it was legitimately made, authorized, etc. But usually the stuff out of India is just pure fake stuff. So anyway, and out of China as well. I use India generally, but China, there's stuff coming out of the Philippines, there's stuff coming out of Brazil, there's stuff coming out of Indonesia, anywhere where the labor is cheap, basically. Now, things like grinder marks, fake damage, recent chips that aren't rusty, that you got to watch the story kind of behind the sign. Where did they get it? If it's chipped up and such around the edges, and for some reason it's not chipped up or scratched up at all on the front, beware, something's off. Be careful. It happens, I suppose, but odds are there's something off. Watch for things like grinder marks. If it's got a grinder mark on it, run, because somebody is aging it or trying to age it. Now, rust is another thing. What a lot of people seem to rely on is this red rust to determine whether it's new or modern fakes that's been aged. Now, a lot of these, or some of these companies are, or individuals are adding rust to them, chemically aging them with acids, with even vinegar will do it, or even just letting them sit in water or moisture for a while, and the rust tends to be a little bit red. But The problem is, or really red or whatever, but you can't necessarily use that as a determining factor because an old sign can have recent rust on it as well, depending upon where it was stored. So you can't really rely on this rust thing. Some people do, but I'm sure they're missing out on legitimate stuff that way that's recently been found in storage or wherever. Now, another thing is grommets. Where are the grommets? Are they in the place they're supposed to be? Compare it to other signs that are known to be originals. Are the grommets in the right place? Are they above the right letters? Are they in the corners in the right spots? Are they the right grommets? Are they brass? Are they steel? Did that sign have brass or steel to begin with? That sort of thing. Now, enameled neon skins, some of the fakes have holes in the weirdest places where there wouldn't have been holes in the originals. So watch for that as well. If you're into neon, you'll get to know where the holes probably should be compared to where they shouldn't be. So watch for that as well. Now, shapes are another thing. Did they originally use that shape? Did they use that particular trapezoid shape or oval or circle or whatever? Early on, there were signs coming out of India, for example, little round Coke signs about yay big. And they were being touted as old. There was little square one or rectangular ones as well. Stuff that was never made originally. There was all kinds of stories as to whether they were old or not, or made in the 50s rather than the 30s, which they looked more 30s. They were just wrong in the first place. Probably outright fakes to begin with, just being made to fool the unaware. And stories get invented to kind of legitimatize them. Colors is another thing. Watch for colors that were never used by those companies. I recently saw an orange crushed palm press, and besides being obviously fake to me, the color was brown rather than orange. So yeah, there's a lot of Coke signs out of India, fake ones being made that were blue, cobalt blue. Well, Coca-Cola never used cobalt blue to advertise their signs, just like Pepsi generally did not use red. I have seen a red Pepsi machine before. Why? I don't know. There was obviously something going on there, but red Pepsi signs, probably not. Coca-Cola would have gone after them pretty heavy for that. Now, again, shapes, color, watch for both. And watch for sizes not originally used as well. So if there's a miniature version of a large sign and that miniature version was never produced originally, well, obviously it's a fantasy item. There's a lot of these little palm presses being made, lots of them, because they're easy to make, they're easy to ship, and they're outright garbage. Some of them are well made, but they're still fake. That's the same to go with flower scrapers or pot scrapers. There's a lot of fake ones out there. Same with license plate toppers. Lots of fake enamel ones out there. Got to really watch for them. There is cases where new old stock comes out. So again, it's a source matter. Where are they coming from? Who is selling them? Who found them? What's the story behind them? Some of these resellers that are crooks or criminals that are selling this fake garbage as real make up some pretty darn convincing stories. But if there's not photographs to support those, be very, very wary. Just be careful. If something seems off, it probably is. A lot of signs, a lot of fake signs are being made using graphics from tins, from cardboard signs, from paper signs, from advertising, etc., that were never used in enamel signs of those companies. So watch for that. Be kind of familiar with the company that the advertising is for, and you can sometimes figure out pretty fast that, oh, it's a fake, it's fantasy, etc. Now, the font or the type of text used on the sign is another thing. Get familiar with modern fonts. If it's a computer font, and I don't mean the fancy, weird font that you think of when people say computer font, but modern made fonts that were never used 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Or fonts from the 50s that are on a sign that is purported to be from the 1920s. So be familiar with when some of these fonts came out. There is some very modern looking fonts that were used in 100 years ago, or 90 years ago, 80 years ago, 70 years ago, 60 years ago. So be aware what ones were used, what ones are modern, because a lot of these are created on computers and are created using these computer fonts that never existed 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Some people say, oh, well, watch for maker's marks. If it doesn't have a maker's mark, then it's fake. No. There's some companies that didn't mark their signs, so there will be no maker's mark on it, on the original. And there might be a maker's mark on the fake sign. Watch for maker's marks on signs of companies that didn't make signs for that company. Say signs made by Veribright, and it's marked Veribright, and it's a sign that was never made by Veribright in the first place. Try to get familiar with the companies that made the signs and who they made signs for. Now, I'm sure there are cases out there where they made a few for a company and then didn't make any more for them, whatever reason, lost a contract or whatever. But the maker's marks don't guarantee that it's a authentic sign by any stretch. Get familiar with how that company marked their signs. Again, watch for that computer font. Some of those signs will use a fake computer font as the maker's mark. Some of them look pretty convincing. So essentially, there is no single way to use as a blanket method to determine what sign is fake. You need to use a variety of methods, a variety of evidentiary things to figure out whether a sign is fake or not. It would be wonderful if there was some easy way to tell all signs, but there just isn't. The fakers are getting very good at doing what they do in creating these fantasy and fake signs. So they are watching the Facebook groups, the internet groups, and whenever we point out an error, they correct it. Or they try to get around it somehow. So they are making these things to deceive. There's no doubt about that. They deny it, as you may have seen in the comment section of the video I've done on fake signs on eBay. So I hope that some of these tips will save you some money, save you some grief, and I'm sure I've missed several other things as well. But be aware that if anybody tells you, well, this is the sure method to determine whether a sign is fake or not necessarily. So you're going to have to use a variety of methods and get familiar with the methods to determine whether a sign is fake or not. Now, I'm not saying I am the expert on determining fake signs or not. I have been in this business for 32 years. I have seen the first ones come out of India back in the 1990s, so I have seen some of the earlier stuff come out and seen some very good fakes even at that time. Some of them were pretty poor quality, some weren't. There were some that were purported to be 1950s that looked 1930s because of the technology being used was older technology at the time, because what happened in the third world was a lot of first world companies would give old technology to the third world countries and they ran with it. They would use and create and still create vintage items brand new. So there's families in India and other countries who were creating this stuff back in turn of the century and are still creating the same merchandise right now. Scientific instruments is one, for example. So you've really got to watch. They'll be of high quality, but they'll be modern. Anyway, as for signs, like I said, there's a lot of companies out there producing this stuff. And there's a lot of North American and UK unscrupulous people who are getting stuff made in India as well and representing it as old when it gets over here. So be careful. And there are other cases where people are getting signs legitimately made there in India because of the cheap factor that intended to sell them as reproductions or fantasy items, but represented them as such, as fantasy, as modern, or limited edition. The problem is a lot of those companies would still take the design and keep cranking out more signs. So even those that are represented as limited editions can end up being flooded on the market because the companies themselves are unscrupulous. They don't care that they are using somebody else's design. They will still crank them out and flood the market with more of this stuff. That happened with a Buffalo sign, Buffalo Oil Company sign, Prairie Cities Oil Company, rather, out of Winnipeg, Manitoba. And a fellow had some made and had, this is a story I heard rather, and had planned to sell them as limited edition, modern fantasy signs. But the company that produced them has now run with it and is cranking those particular signs out left, right, center, and will sell them to anybody who wants one. So they're not limited in any way, unfortunately. So, yeah. Anyway, so that's about all I've got to say, I guess. I'm sure there's lots of other things I've missed. But anyway, hopefully these tips will save you some money. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And check out our other videos on antiquing, picking, thrifting, scrapping, etc. Take care, folks.